In the heart of East Texas, a crime so brutal, so unthinkable, left an entire community shaken to its core. A 13-month-old baby girl, Amora Carson, was found dead, her body bearing injuries so severe that investigators could barely comprehend the cruelty behind them. The man at the center of this horror was Blaine Milam, a name that would become synonymous with one of the most disturbing child murder cases in Texas history. For more than 17 years, Milam sat on death row, his case tangled in appeals, controversy, and unanswered questions. And in September 2025, the state of Texas carried out his execution, closing the final chapter in a story filled with tragedy, faith, and justice. But what really happened in the last 24 hours of Blaine Milam's life? What were his final words, and how did he face the end? Stay with me as we uncover the chilling fact behind the crime, the trial, and the final moments on Texas death row. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, share this story, and leave your thoughts in the comments below, because your voice matters in this discussion. This is a story of Blaine Milam, and it begins with a crime that shook Texas forever. December 2008. East Texas would never forget the day baby Amora Carson was found dead inside a trailer home in Rusk County. At just 13 months old, her life had ended in unspeakable violence. Investigators arriving on scene were confronted with an image that chilled them to the core. Amora's tiny body bore catastrophic injuries. Skull fractures, broken bones, bite marks, and internal trauma so severe that the medical examiner would later testify she could not isolate a single cause of death. Instead, the infant had endured prolonged torture, a relentless assault stretching over hours. At the center of this tragedy stood Blaine Milam, a young man from East Texas, and Jessica Carson, Amora's own mother. The pair claimed they had been trying to perform an exorcism, convinced the toddler was possessed by demons. It was a defense that stunned the courtroom and horrified the public. The brutality of the crime was overwhelming. Prosecutors detailed how Amora's final hours were spent in agony, describing broken ribs, torn internal organs, signs of strangulation, and even trauma suggesting possible sexual assault. One report listed more than 24 human bite marks, evidence of unspeakable cruelty. The community recoiled, searching for answers. How could a child be subjected to such torment by those meant to protect her? Why would anyone believe a baby could be possessed? The case of Blaine Milam would soon become one of the most notorious child murder prosecutions in Texas history, and it would raise questions about crime, punishment, science, and justice that would reverberate for nearly 2 decades. But before justice could be served, the state of Texas would put Milam on a path toward death row, where his fate would be sealed. In the days after Amora's death, investigators pieced together the evidence. Milam and Carson initially claimed they had left the child alone briefly, only to return and find her dead. But as forensic experts examined the body, the truth emerged. The injuries were inflicted deliberately and repeatedly. Prosecutors charged both Milam and Carson with capital murder. Jessica Carson, the baby's mother, eventually received life without parole. But for Blaine Milam, the state sought the death penalty. At trial in 2010, jurors listened to the chilling testimony of the medical examiner. They saw photographs documenting injuries so extensive they were difficult to comprehend. The brutality spoke for itself, and after deliberation, the jury found Blaine Milam guilty of capital murder. He was sentenced to die by lethal injection. At just 20 years old, Blaine Milam became one of the youngest inmates on Texas death row. His case drew immediate attention because of the disturbing nature of the crime and the shocking defense of an exorcism. But as Milam settled into life behind the walls of Texas death row, the fight was only beginning. His attorneys quickly launched appeals, raising questions that would follow his case for years. Was the forensic evidence reliable? Was he intellectually disabled? And should he be spared execution under evolving legal standards? Each question would delay, but never derail the state's determination to carry out his death sentence. And as the legal battles raged on, the years ticked by, bringing Milam closer to the day when he would face the gurney in Huntsville. Appeals defined Blaine Milam's years on death row. His attorneys targeted the forensic evidence that helped convict him, especially the use of bite mark analysis. Across the nation, experts were rejecting bite mark evidence as unreliable, even dangerous. In Milam's case, lawyers argued it had been used to tie him directly to Amora's injuries. They also raised claims of intellectual disability. Psychologists pointed to IQ scores in a range of the high 60s to low 80s, as well as significant deficits in reading, math, and daily functioning. Under U.S. Supreme Court precedent in Atkins versus Virginia, individuals with intellectual disability cannot be executed. In January 2019, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals granted Milam a stay of execution, ordering a review of these issues. For a moment, it seemed possible his death sentence might be overturned, but prosecutors never wavered. They emphasized the sheer brutality of Amora's injuries. To them, this was a crime so horrific that no amount of mitigation could erase the suffering inflicted. The appeals wound their way through state and federal courts. Again and again, higher courts rejected Milam's petitions. The U.S. Supreme Court, too, declined to intervene, leaving the death sentence intact. By 2024, Milam had faced 2 previous execution dates, both delayed. But now a new date was set, September 25th, 2025. The countdown had begun, and as the final days approached, every motion failed. Every plea was denied, and Milam entered his last 24 hours alive. On September 25th, 2025, inside Huntsville's Walls Unit, Blaine Milam awoke to his final day. At 35 years old, he had spent nearly half his life on death row. Now, the end was hours away. That morning, prison officials began the routine of execution day. Security was heightened, schedules were tight, and every step was recorded. Milam was given a chance to request a special last meal, but he declined. Unlike others who ordered extravagant dinners, he ate nothing beyond the standard prison food offered. Throughout the day, his attorneys fought desperately in court. They filed petitions to the U.S. Supreme Court, arguing once more that Milam's intellectual disability should bar his execution. But as the hours passed, one rejection after another came down. Hope faded with each ruling. As the sun dipped over Huntsville, Milam was escorted to the death chamber. Witnesses filed in, journalists, officials, and relatives of the victim. The atmosphere was heavy, charged with silence and anticipation. He was strapped to the gurney, intravenous lines placed in his arms. The room fell quiet as the warden asked if he had a final statement. And in that moment, the world held its breath, waiting for Blaine Milam's last words. At 6:40 p.m., Blaine Milam was pronounced dead by lethal injection. But before the fatal dose of pentobarbital silenced him forever, Milam spoke. His words were not of apology, nor of regret for Amora's death. Instead, he turned to faith. "I love you all," he said, urging everyone listening to embrace Jesus Christ as Savior. "Bring me home, Jesus." Witnesses reported he gasped once, then began snoring softly as the drug took hold. Within minutes, his chest stilled and the execution was complete. For Texas, it was another execution, the 5th of the year. For Amora's family, it was the closing of a chapter that began 17 years earlier with the most horrific crime imaginable. But the case leaves behind haunting questions. Was this true justice for Amora Carson, the 13-month-old baby whose life ended in violence? Or was it also a failure of a system that ignored doubts about forensics and intellectual disability? The story of Blaine Milam is one that Texas will not soon forget, a story of brutality, of faith, of law, and of the ultimate punishment. And now I want to hear from you. Do you believe justice was served in this case? Comment your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more true crime stories that uncover the darkest corners of the human heart.